Hello, everybody. This is Berl Schwartz. Not long ago, I had the pleasure of hearing my guest today speak to the Rotary Club of Lansing. During that conversation, he casually mentioned he's gay. It's not something you often hear speakers say at Rotary. This is Gay Pride Month, and I'm honored to introduce you to the new president of Western Michigan University Cooley Law School, James McGrath. President McGrath, thank you so much for joining us.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for asking.
I want to start actually with that Rotary talk because you did point out that you're gay, and I wondered why you did that because you could have talked about a whole lot of other things.
Sure. So I don't know if you noticed, some people say my ego knows no bounds. I do the first 4 or 5 slides I do about me, so I get people to know who I am. And a very important part of me is my family. And it's hard to hide the fact that I'm gay when I have a husband and a little 7-year-old daughter. It calls into question, wait a minute. So I also think it's really important for gay people to be out because it just makes it so much easier for others who are struggling with their identity.
And so I would like to talk to you about struggling with your own identity and how you dealt with coming out.
Sure. So again, I came out a long time ago. And
how old are you?
I'm 63.
Okay.
So when I was in high school, there were not any positive role models. Being gay was virtually a crime. Doing anything, homosexual was certainly a crime in most places. And, the only images I had of gay people in my head or from, talking with people were a very, men who were more like women. And, not that there's anything wrong with it, but I just didn't identify that way. And I thought, well, I'm not gay, but I don't know what I am. Something's different about me. And I went back and forth in high school thinking about what that was and what that meant. And, then I joined the Air Force right after high school. And what a great place to, question your sexuality. You're put in a room with 50 other men and dressing with them, showering with them. And it's dawned on me that I did have an attraction to other men. And I wasn't the only one who sought refuge in the military, struggling with their sexual identity issues. And it was very easy to meet other, gay men in the military. And I had my first crush, my first boyfriend, my first kiss was in the military. And at the time, there was no such thing as don't ask, don't tell. If you were found out, there could be serious circumstances. But they did ask, and I told. And so my career was cut short. So I just about finished 3 years. But because I'd been, I think, a fairly exemplary, young airman, I had a medal for, conduct, and not just the good conduct medal, but a medal for some, superior service. I was given an honorable discharge. And, it was really fortuitous in that I was kind of ready to get out of the military. I discovered what's different about me is that I'm gay. And there's a whole gay world out there. And I wanted to go back to school. I was ready finally to go to college. I didn't do too well in high school because I really was kind of a rebel. I was kind of struggling with my whole identity. And it kind of came out in weird ways, like, just being very rebellious, getting alcohol at a young age, and things like that.
That's interesting. Did you, being gay in high school is no easy thing, but being anything in high school is not easy. But you said you acted out?
Yeah, I was definitely a juvenile delinquent of sorts. I'm not proud. I'm not going to recite some things that I did that I'm not very proud of, but I was very, destructive and self-destructive as well. Did a lot of things to get attention. And
do you think that was because you were struggling with your sexual orientation?
I think so. It might just be because I'm kind of a jerk, but I think it's the former. But I thought it would be funny to drive my car down the corridor into the lunchroom because it was a Volkswagen and it would fit. That kind of thing, just to get attention. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it was all related. That was the most harmless thing I did. There's other things I'm not so proud of. Not that I'm proud of that.
Well, let's go a little bit forward then. What was the next step in your career after the military?
Sure. So I got out of the military a little sooner than I or my family expected. And, I made up the story that I got out early to go to college. And I immediately applied for college when I knew I was getting out and was accepted. And so I started going to school in January.
Where
And
did you go to school?
I went to Rhode Island College and I started studying theater. Not to be too stereotypical, the gay guy studies theater, but it's what I wanted to do. And I really enjoyed it, but I was taking mostly performance classes, not really getting the regular college experience. And there was an audition for a local children's theater traveling company. And it was very well known at the time. It was improvisational and experimental. So it looked like a lot of fun. The kids got to join the show and you had to think on your feet. And so I really wanted to do it. So I auditioned, and to my surprise, I got the job. And I had to think, do I want a degree in theater or do I want a job in theater? And I was like, yeah, the job in theater was much more attractive to me at the time. And although it was probably one of the most fun jobs I've ever had, it paid minimum wage. And, at the time I had bought this house in Rhode Island for $1. And the deal was, it was an abandoned house. It had been abandoned for 20 years. If you fixed it up, they would forgive the taxes. So you had to live in it for 5 years. So I was doing all of that. And, I had a lot going on, and minimum wage was not cutting it. I started working as a DJ at clubs. I started doing sound for bands. I started playing in a band. And the band was a lot of fun. We did a lot of different things like that.
What did you play?
I was the singer. And I'm not much of a singer. I played a little saxophone as well. It was in the new wave era, so you can do a lot of discordant stuff, which is fun, even on purpose. We did tour around a little bit as far west as Chicago, and we put out a couple of vinyl records that were just horrendous. I listen to them today and I cringe, but they're kind of fun. Anyway, from that, I was around clubs a lot, and one of my bosses was not a great manager, and I was, they were closing that club, and I was like, a couple of drinks, and I was like poo-pooing the way that this guy managed the place. He was an idiot, and I would do so much better. And what everybody didn't tell me was he was standing right behind me, and he says, "If you think you can do it better, I'll sell you my liquor license." And of course, at the time, it seemed like a ridiculous amount of money to me. It was $25,000, and today that's probably, I don't know, at least 150, or at least 100. And I was like, "Oh, I don't have that kind of money." He goes, "Well, sell your house." I'm like, "I'll do it." So I sold my house, and I thought I had enough money to open the club, but it actually took about 8 to 10 times that amount. I had to borrow a lot of money. It was really hard. And I had the benefit of a high school education plus about a year and a half in theater. So I wasn't really ready for this. But, the club worked out okay, and we had all original bands, and that was the whole thing. Everybody was expecting me to open a gay club because I had bought it from my boss who had a gay club. And I was really interested in a place where artists that wrote their own songs, like my band did, could play, because bands like that are not very popular. And opening at a club that does just that does not make it a popular club. So we're only open Thursday through Saturday. Those are the only nights you can draw in a crowd for bands like that. And because I couldn't afford to have my club and an apartment, I lived in the club. And just for your information, in case this should ever arise in your life, a single mattress will fit perfectly on a pool table, and the little pockets become drink holders. And so this club was full of monitors, which we called televisions back then. And I would play movies at night, when I was there. And I would invite some friends over on Tuesday night because we were definitely closed. And they were mostly gay people. And I put out a big bucket full of beer. And then people would invite other people. And before I knew it, we had 40 or 50 people showing up on Tuesday nights. And I thought, maybe there is a market for this. So I didn't want everybody to think it was turning into a gay club. I was really worried, not that I was closeted, I was pretty out, but that people wouldn't want to go to a club that was associated with gay people. So I had a private party every Tuesday night, and I had these little cards printed that you need to have one to get in. And it said a special invitation for a rock and roll dance party for gay people only. And I put a special invitation from Peter O'Hara. There is no Peter O'Hara. And I just didn't want to be to blame, because what happened was it became so very popular. And that was the best thing I did, because people come up to me and say, "James, I really need an invitation." I'm like, "Oh, I wish I could help you out, but Peter O'Hara, he's the guy that runs this. So you'll have to see him. And of course, no one could see him. But it really became so ridiculously popular that the people on rock and roll nights were like, oh, I don't care. I need to come to this. And it was my biggest night of the week. So it's
How
kind
long did you keep the club?
I kept it for just over 3 years. And at the end, you know, we did a lot of fun things because I was in a band. All of my employees were in bands. Every time we changed the decor, and in very rudimentary ways, like mostly decorations with a theme, like caveman night, heavy metal night, Las Vegas night, country western night. So I put a corral up around the dance floor, silly things, big cactuses. The employees would get together and make a band. So we had a country band, a Las Vegas band, we had the caveman band. We did all a heavy metal band. It was really fun. On heavy metal night, though, one of the guys got crazy with his guitar, smashed it against the pole in the club, and a piece flew out over the audience and hit a woman directly in the face as she opened the door. And I learned my very first legal lesson that we owe the people coming to our place of public accommodation the highest duty of all. And so I was sued, and it was clear I was going to lose. I was horribly underinsured, and both me and the landlord we're going to lose a lot of money. And it was going to take like a year for this to go through. And I just lost the will to keep working on this club. And so I gave it to my employees and I said, you can keep it open as long as you can. It's yours. So I didn't want to fire 40 people just because I was tired of working there. And they actually found someone to pump some money into it, and they kept it open for another 10 years at least.
That's great. So now we're in the 80s, I presume.
Yes.
And that's obviously a dark time for the gay community. How did the AIDS crisis, how did you deal with that?
Okay, so my very first, I started hearing about gay cancer, and then they called it gay-related immunodeficiency disease, GRID. And I had this friend, Richard. We had this kind of love-hate thing going on, and he had just met someone who he called the love of his life, and he was from New Haven because he was, a Yale student, and he would go down to see him on the weekends. It's not too far from Rhode Island, New Haven, Connecticut. And just about 2 weeks into the relationship, he said, "Oh, I got to go down to New Haven this weekend. My new boyfriend he's got pneumonia. He's in the hospital." I'm like, "Oh, that's terrible." I said, "That's just like you, Richard. 1 minute you're marrying them, and next minute you're burying them." And he just laughed, and we laughed. But he actually died a few weeks later because at the time, people live a long time with HIV disease, if they're treated properly. But back then, people were infected long before they showed any symptoms. And so people were dropping dead really fast. And so I could not believe I'd said that. And by the way, he has never let me forget it. And we started doing things at the club, some kind of benefits. We had Artists Against AIDS, our own little local one. We did all sorts of dance benefits to raise money for people who were afflicted with HIV. But it was like a drop in the bucket. Things were so expensive. The only medicine that could treat HIV disease was AZT, which cost $10,000 per year per patient. And so I got very angry and heard about this group in New York called ACT UP. And they were doing these great demonstrations and, really putting the public spotlight on the government's inaction against this epidemic. When Legionnaire's disease came out, like a dozen Legionnaires were afflicted, they swung into action and we had a cure in no time. But, it's gay men, it's some Haitian men. So we have, gay men and black men who are dying of this disease, not so fast to get and swing into action. It was years before the president even said the word AIDS. So we were very upset and angry. And then we had a local group in Rhode Island start too. And a lot of places around the country were starting ACT UPs. Sometimes they called them ACT NOWs. And ours was started by these gentlemen and a couple of women from Brown University. And really smart, really bright people, and I love working with them. I, again, had a year and a half in college where I was just doing performance classes. I was not as well read. They really didn't have much of an opinion of my intellect. I had an opinion, but it wasn't very positive. And so they kind of tolerated me because I gave them a space to meet. And they were calling themselves ACT NOW. And after about 6 weeks, I said, you need to change your name to ACT UP. And they said, why? And they said, because it's been 6 weeks and you haven't done a damn thing. So you're not really acting now. So we need to change the name. And they did. And they said, well, what ideas do you have? And mine were kind of grown out of my New York experience. I would go every Monday to ACT UP New York's meetings at the Gay Community Center. And it's like 3.5 hours to get there. So it was kind of a trek, but it was worth it. And once in a while, if I could afford a cheap flight, I would fly down, but mostly it was driving down. And I came back with just great ideas. And so one of the things we started doing was our own little, we call them art campaigns, because the public health department in Rhode Island had decided to do mandatory HIV testing reporting. So if you got a test, it was reported that you, number one, tested, and then whether it was positive or negative, everybody knew pretty much you were either worried you were gay or you were worried you were Haitian, which is a problem. And then it was keeping people from getting the test. And so we fought against that. We did a sit-in in the governor's office, and we were arrested, because that's the whole point of nonviolent civil disobedience. You get arrested, media attention on you. We were doing things like that. And then finally, my art projects. So we had big billboards all over the state that said, call this number for testing, and it sounded very caring, but they were going to track you. And so we went around at night and painted over the phone number of all of those billboards, little art projects like that. And my favorite was Rhode Island's a small state, so it was easier to do than most states. At the border, there's a big sign that says, "Welcome to Rhode Island, the ocean state." And we actually had these big metal plates we riveted on that said, instead of the ocean state, says "Home of Mandatory HIV Testing." So those were our art projects. So going to New York every week, I happened, some of my friends call me either Zelig or Forrest Gump, because I kind of get myself into situations just by being there. And I ended up sitting near Peter Staley, who's now very, very famous. You can read about him in the Smithsonian Museum. He's featured in many books, How to Survive a Plague. A great guy, just amazing activist, and other people as well. And I became part of his little group called the Power Tools. And they were named that way because on one of our actions, let's say, it's a small subgroup of ACT UP. ACT UP would get hundreds and hundreds of people to go to demonstrations, but we were a small group that would infiltrate. So we went to Burroughs Wellcome, the drug company that made AZT, to try to shine a spotlight on the high cost of the drug. And what we did is we went in as if we had an appointment with someone, and while the receptionist was trying to find someone, we snuck into an elevator and took over a suite of offices on the second floor. And my job with the Power Tools was to put metal plates into the door and into the frame so that no one could get in. We barricaded ourselves in a suite of offices. And the idea was to smash out the windows and put up a big banner that said, "Fuck your profiteering, people are dying. Burroughs Wellcome is," I forgot everything except the "fuck your profiteering." And unfortunately, everybody said, what are all these tools you're bringing? I said, well, I want to be ready for anything. And they thought we could just smash out the windows by picking up a file cabinet. Turns out you can't. Those things have a lot of spring back, and so they would just bounce off. I was going to knock out the windows at the corners with the hammer, but I didn't have one. So we never got the windows out, but we did hold a press conference, and we did get a lot of exposure for that. I think our most famous action, though, was at the New York Stock Exchange. So again, Burroughs Wellcome wasn't actually publicly traded, but there was a way to trade interest in Burroughs Wellcome. So we again staged a demonstration at the New York Stock Exchange. And I'm sure you're all familiar on opening day, at the opening bell, sometimes they'll have an IPO featured, and they'll be standing on that balcony with the clock and everybody's happy. And so we went in on a day when that was not happening. And we dressed what we called in business drag, which was just a suit with a little pin that said, I was from Bear Stearns, other people from other companies. And we snuck in with a few photographers that were going to take pictures, because there's no pictures allowed in there. They had smaller cameras. And we went up in the balcony just a few minutes before the bell. And 3 minutes exactly before the bell went off, we pulled the trigger on air horns, and it was deafening. There's 6 of us up there. And the air horns went for 5 full minutes. We had timed it, of course. and nobody heard the starting bell. But people were furious, and they were yelling at us, "What are you doing?" And we have a big banner up. I believe it either said "Act Up" or "Fuck Your Profiteering." Either way, they were incensed by it. And we started throwing out these fake $100 bills that had a message about Burroughs Welcome on them. And the people were not in any way positive about this action, and were trying to get at us to probably kill us. So I was so relieved when the police showed up this time, because we had handcuffed ourselves to that balcony and we had no keys. So I was glad to see the police. Luckily, we had regulation handcuffs. They were able to extricate us from the balcony and get us out. Even though people were trying to hit us, but we got out. We all got out alive.
And did you end up going to jail for that?
Yeah. Well, yes.
That was the point.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole point. Now, the thing about the big demonstrations is most everybody gets out that day or the next day. And actually, at our big NIH demonstration, we actually negotiated with the police. They said, "We know you're going to get arrested. Can we streamline the process so everybody get out that day?" And it says, as long as you don't smash things and break things, then you'll be treated like, nonviolent civil disobedient. Of course, things were broken. Not everybody got out that day. But this was different, and we weren't sure. And so I felt like it was my duty to be one of these guys, because I didn't have a boss. I had my own nightclub, and people could run the club for me. So I said, on these bigger asks, I'm gonna do it. So somebody else doesn't have to get arrested, who might not be able to get out of jail and might lose their job. When we went to Burroughs Welcome, that was in the South, and we were in New York up in, and not that it was super favorable where we were at, but much more favorable environment for gay and lesbian people than it was in North Carolina. And so when we went down there, we weren't sure how much the bail was going to be set at. So if I may name drop, Keith Haring, very famous artist who actually succumbed to HIV disease, he gave each one of us, I looked up the number, $10,000 each in traveler's checks. And so there's a lot of them, because I think the highest denomination was $100, and each one had Keith Haring's signature on it. And I was like, oh man, I want one of those. But no, it was only in case we needed the bail. And because 3 of us were actually infected with HIV, Burroughs Welcome did not want us to spend considerable time in jail, and actually lobbied to get us out of jail. And again, we ended up staying there just one day. So we got very lucky with that, because we were charged with amazing things in both of them, like fraudulently representing ourselves by using those name tags. We were told we kidnapped someone by running past them to get in the elevator, like ridiculous charges. We could have been in jail for a long time awaiting trial. So we were very thankful that Burroughs Welcome was actually an ally in that. And by the way, after each of these actions, Burroughs Welcome dropped their price 20%, but it was a coincidence each time that they had been planning that the next day already.
Of course. And during that time, I understand you had some encounters with the late, great Larry Kramer. What was he like?
Well, he is a real hero of mine. And, we don't see eye to eye on everything. And to be honest with you, I met him, but I doubt he would even have remembered my name, because he had such disdain for me. And I can't really blame him. I was the new person to the group. I was very unsophisticated compared to like Peter Staley and David Levitt, who's a very famous author. And there's a lot of people there that really steeped in the knowledge you needed to really be a great activist. I was still learning, and I was just willing to take chances that got me into the group. And so Larry, fortunately for me, he never vocalized his disdain, because it probably would have ruined me. But you could tell he had no love for me. And, I don't agree with everything Larry did. He had very Victorian views on sex. Like he thought sex should be between 2 people, or in love and stuff like that. And I was a little more sex positive at the time. I wasn't married either. And he wrote the book Faggots, that really was excoriating the quote gay lifestyle. And not every gay man is crazy sexual debauchery kind of person as in that book. But he was that way a long time before HIV hit. And, it kind of solidified his view, like, well, look, if we're not doing this stuff, these horrible things won't happen. And people were very upset with him because certainly it wasn't what's caused HIV, but it did help it spread faster in the community. But he was just an amazing man. He kept us on our toes. He kept people angry, which was really important to get this stuff done. Angry enough to get arrested, angry enough to help change the laws. One of the biggest things about ACT UP helped everybody, and that's parallel tracking. The AIDS treatment group, which is a big part of ACT UP, later on they split off on their own. They came up with this way of parallel tracking drugs that needed to be approved for treatment. People didn't want to join trials because they didn't want to be given a placebo. So they had parallel tracks where people could join the trial, or you could get the drug under a compassionate use, so that you could try to save your life. People were dying back then, and they pioneered it. And Dr. Fauci, who we all know is the guy to talk about infectious diseases with. He at first didn't like the idea, but later on signed on to it completely. Tried to bring in one of the really important people in the AIDS treatment group to be working at the CDC. He thought so much of him, but he didn't. He continued to be an outside, person fighting the man, as it were. But anyway, really great, exciting, but sad and deadly time. And when I look around my cohort, there's not a lot of men my age. There's far fewer because they should be alive today because of HIV. That it really more than decimated. I know people don't like to use that word because it really means 1 out of 10, but it really just destroyed, a lot of people's lives. And really, there's not a lot in my peer group left. I don't know how to say it better. I wish that wasn't recorded so I could do it again. Anyway. Oh, you're muted.
In the couple of minutes we have left, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the frontiers, the legal hurdles that the LGBTQ community still faces. What are the challenges today?
So if you had asked me yesterday, I would say I'm really concerned about what the Supreme Court is going to do in terms of how we view sex discrimination. And, recently courts have been viewing it for the most part as sex discrimination would include sexual orientation discrimination, gender identity discrimination, and we're really moving in that direction. A judge in Fort Worth decided that wasn't the case, and Trump was talking about taking away some rights of some transgendered individuals in terms of health, and we're thinking, the domino is gonna fall with not just healthcare, but with jobs. And so we're very concerned. But the ruling today, as you know, is surprising, 6-3, that sex discrimination does include gender identity and sexual orientation. So I think the future is looking a lot rosier than I thought it was just a few days ago.
Yeah, it seems that Justice Scalia perhaps said it best, that gay marriage is just going to be the beginning, that everything will follow from that. Do you think that's pretty accurate?
I think so. And, he did not look at that as a positive thing, right? Let's just be clear. That was this is the beginning of the end of probably in his mind, civilization. But, going back to Larry, people were really upset with the gay community for being very hedonistic and, very selfish. Yet when people try to, do the societal thing and marry one person, we can't do that either. So where does that leave you? And so I think it's a choice people want to make. And, gay people aren't the only ones that are so hedonic. And I just think he was right. And I don't think, I thought that perhaps this current administration, the Trump administration, was going to set us back a long way. And certainly there have been setbacks. But right now, people are really incensed by injustices. And I don't want to compare gay and lesbian people and people of color, because there are people of color who are gay and lesbian. But this is a great time to remind people that, we're all just looking for the same thing. We want to live our lives and love who we want to love, and not be afraid of the police and not be afraid of discrimination. We want an equal shot like everybody else.
That is a very good note, I think, to end on, a very positive note. I want to thank you for helping us celebrate Gay Pride Month here in Lansing. It's a pleasure to have you in our community, and I look forward to getting to know you better.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. And everyone, thanks for watching this latest installment in the series we call City Pulse Newsmakers. Have a nice day.